Wow, everybody do scurry in, into your seats. The whole family is here. Scurrying, grab a seat. Did you have good breakout sessions? Do you like breakout sessions?
Have you solved the world's problems?
Oh, serious? Are you there?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I came running down because I thought you hadn't made it.
No, but you're doing all this. I'm just here to...
No, you're here. Look.
No.
Okay, so we've had...
David. I know. Come on, hurry up.
Okay, come on guys. We need you in, sitting. We're doing pretty well. Grabbing seats on the risers there. This is a difficulty because there's so many of you. We can't get you in and out quickly. But I suppose if you're all talking, it means you all like each other, hey? Okay, so we've had lots of conversation about emerging markets, growing economies have come up a lot. Earlier in the transparency and integrity session,
if you don't settle down, Kate will shout at you, and you don't want that.
everybody hush up. Okay, now we thought it would be a good idea to move beyond the usual consensus of trade and interest groups and China versus the US or oil versus people with no oil, and look at something which is a term that has been used increasingly in recent years, and we actually try to get the guy here who coined the term, which is BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, so the big emerging economies. And here they are today. We thought that it would be a really hot topic. David.
So we've invited delegates, ambassadors and councillors from the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. And we have James Chau, the very famous anchor from CCTV in China, who's here to lead them in conversation. So I'm going to hand you over to James. James.
Thanks a lot, David. We're really excited to be here. We've only got 30 minutes. As Kate and David said, we're talking about 5 countries called Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, called BRICS. And why it's so exciting, I think, to many of us here is that when I think of BRICS, and when we think of BRICS, we think of one young world. Together, they represent 3 billion people in our world. They have a combined GDP of $13.7 trillion US, and they have a combined foreign reserves that amounts to about $4 trillion. But what's more exciting about that is that far beyond BRICS, they speak to the possibilities and dreams of countries also that aren't amongst these 5, but are similarly emerging economies, from Mexico to Malaysia, from Thailand to Turkey. They're not just emerging markets, they also have young and dynamic populations. They have huge and surging internet penetrations there. They have a growing voice on the political and diplomatic stage. And also, well, they're pretty cool as well. So they are challenging and they're complementing the way that we've done business for over 100 years and the way that we also think according to traditional power. So as we said just there, we've got councillors, delegates and ambassadors here on the stage from the 5 countries. We're going to set the scene, we're going to go into practice to see how it works in reality, and then we're going to see how we can go forward and what it also means to you no matter which country or which part of the world you're from. So let's start off with Miller from South Africa. South Africa is very important to us. Not only is it the newest country in BRICS since 2011, it in a way also represents and pulls in the African continent into this grouping. And of course, Johannesburg is the next host city of One Young World. So Miller, you're the CEO of Brand South Africa, but if you were the CEO of Brand BRICS, what would you tell us about BRICS and what it pulls together, what they all share?
Well, thanks, James, and good evening to everyone. Let me start off by saying that BRICS, as it stands, is really a grouping or a formation that is bringing together countries and economies that have similarities in many areas, but also have areas of challenge that are almost common. So it's almost, one could put it, a formation that is based on socio-economic imperatives, but also with a view to moving the collaboration beyond just socio-economic issues. So I would say that there are certain areas of commonality that bring the BRICS countries together. Like they are all mostly emerging markets. And if you look at some of the challenges that emerging markets face, you'll find that South Africa and the other partner countries have similar challenges. But also they present with similar opportunities. And I think the essence is that they're seeking to exploit the complementarities between the different countries. And therefore, it forms part of an earlier initiative in the 50s to have cooperation between the countries of the South. So if you look at the BRICS formation, it's actually a formation that has its origins earlier, far back than just when O'Neill coined the term, because the interest has always been there for cooperation between these countries. The critical issue there is that these countries have an interest, for instance, in transforming global governance systems. They have an interest in elevating the voices of emerging markets and emerging economies. So when South Africa sits within the BRICS, it might not purport to speak for the whole of Africa, but it raises the agenda of Africa very strongly. And I believe that it is the same with other partner countries within the BRICS economies. And therefore, elevating the voices of the emerging markets is important. Transforming the global governance structures in terms of the old Bretton Woods institutions, those are some of the things that bring these countries together. But lastly, they also believe in the fact that we are living in a multipolar world where interdependency is critical. And therefore, it is important that we collaborate, we cooperate, but we also respect each other from a policy perspective. And if there are areas that we believe that we can contribute, and these are around the area of, for instance, governance, as I said, of international institutions. These are areas of technology, there are areas of health and youth that have been defined in the Sanya Declaration as basis for cooperation between these countries. And lastly, investment and trade.
Okay, well, let's go from your far left to your far right, to Natalia Vodianova. Your face is known literally to millions of people as a leading fashion model, but your voice, your spirit, and your story is known to millions more as the founder of Naked Heart, the Naked Heart Foundation. Go to nakedheart.org to hear Natalia's amazing story and the work that she does over there. But you heard Miller setting the scene there for BRICS, and I wanted to take that to you so that you could talk about the practice and specifically three-way partnerships that links government to private sector to NGOs, and specifically the experiences that you've had with Naked Heart.
Thank you, James. Oh, yes, I'm louder than I thought I would be. That's good. What I really want to talk about today is what we all, I think, BRIC countries, what we have in common is the fact that NGO sector is very undeveloped. I think you would agree with me on that. And at the same time, NGO sector often have more experience or more knowledge, more know-how on some issues that the government of the BRICS countries would be really willing to tackle. We're talking about the social systems that are very undeveloped, and those need to be developed further. And at the same time, what also unites us is that it's wealthy economies. There is wealthy, very wealthy private sector. So how can, and often the government, in fact, I can only speak on behalf of Russia, but right now what's happening in Russia is that there is sort of this push and pull where at one time the government tries to control NGO sector and restrict, we've been called agents and spies, and so we have to live under these rules where at any moment they can pull the plug, so to speak. However, I also today here to tell the story where actually we can collaborate, and in fact by collaborating we can tackle some issues. And for example, in Naked Heart Foundation, when I founded Naked Heart Foundation, I knew these challenges of Russia, and so I wanted to create a project that would be understandable, very tangible, to both to society and to the government, where the government would not feel that we are threatening them with anything. So I created a project of building play parks throughout Russia. So I started by addressing the local government. It's always easier to address the local government than the main government, than the federal government. And I addressed the local government of my hometown, Nizhny Novgorod, and I presented them the project, and they loved it and they supported it. However, of course, the funds of Naked Heart is funded, as many NGOs, by private sector. So in that way, Naked Heart has served almost like an agent in between providing safe play parks for children to play in that are very necessary for children to have childhood. You know, this is something that is also these parks are inclusive, they're big, they're in some areas, poor areas of Russia, they're like Disneyland arrived to town. So today we have, well, not today, but next year we'll celebrate 100 mark. We've built 100 play parks and playgrounds by raising funds from the private sector and collaborating with the government. But also now we started a second program, which I will talk about briefly, that where real challenges coming in, because we are talking about supporting families with children with special needs. And today, this particular social part of society, it's really vulnerable in Russia. And I'm sure it's also something that unites us all. There's government institutions that most of these children are housed in, and these places are in no way providing any opportunities for these children. And if the families are brave enough to keep the child at home, then more often than not, the family falls apart. It brings poverty, it brings all kinds of struggle, because there is no system in place that set up there by the government to provide this kind of support. So, okay, 2 years ago, I started to think about how to address this issue, and so today, Naked Heart Foundation is serving a role of an umbrella charity for a lot of different organizations who are underfunded, who don't have this support. So we provide the funds. We're also now starting to be the voice, and we're collaborating much more with the government, because all of you young people here, you are revolutionary. So you want to, in a way, you want to break the old systems, and you want to build something new, something yourself. However, in the BRICS, I think what we have in common is that we cannot do that straight away. We cannot break those systems straight away. There's thousands of people involved in these systems, and even re-educating them would take really long time. So I think that I'm all for remembering the past, remembering the future, you know, thinking about the future, and aligning these 3 points between now, the past, and today, and saying how can we collaborate. So each one is that middle point. So find your way to collaborate with the older generation and think about the future.
I live in China. I'm just going to touch quickly onto the media aspect of BRICS and how it pulls us all together. In the last year, I've covered the Durban Climate Change Conference, the Mexico G20, and also Rio +20 and the Earth Summit, but all for television, which is the old way of doing media. Traditional media is still important in developing countries, but of course we have another aspect which brings us all together, which is of course digital media. In China, for example, Facebook isn't as easily accessible, but we have interfaces rather like Facebook. You have Twitter, we have Weibo, and of course there are different experiences in different BRICS countries. If we look at BRICS as a whole though, as much as what they share are the fact that they all have emerging market status, they also have emerging questions. For example, in some communities it may be free flow of information. In other countries and communities it may be a question of not just, as one of our delegates said today, the availability of electricity supplies, but also the availability of hardware, computers, laptops, and even the know-how and the technology to utilize them. But of course, what social media, what digital media, and what all media does is to bring opportunities. It gives us a voice and gives us networks when we connect to each other. I think what we also need to remember is that how do we make sure that millions of people in communities that can't access media readily, whatever that media may be, how do we make sure that they don't get left behind? How do we make sure that everybody stays included? How do we make sure that while we try to bring them into the technology race, that they're still learning, they're still growing, they're still getting connected, they're still absorbing knowledge all at the same time. So I think that's what we need to think about in terms of media. That's just my opinion. And also we're joined by one more councillor, who's Vanderlei from Brazil, who's an Olympic medalist in marathon athletics. And when I was thinking about BRICS, what they also share, what we said earlier, is young and dynamic and exciting populations. When we talk about sports in particular, Brazil is hosting a World Cup and the Rio Olympics, Russia, the Sochi Olympics, India just had the Commonwealth Games, China had the Beijing Olympics, and South Africa had the World Cup. They obviously share all that in common, but when you think of sports, when you think of youth, when you think of BRICS, what are the linkages and how can you make magic happen from there?
Bom, estou muito feliz de estar aqui, é a minha primeira vez. O Brasil é a oitava economia, mas o Brasil precisa avançar em muitas outras áreas, principalmente na área da educação. E o Brasil vive um problema social muito grande agora, que é o problema das drogas.
I'm really happy to be here. This is my first time at the event. And I think that it's a great opportunity for us to be, is it working? Yeah. To be hosting the event right now. And what I think is we're going through a lot of really serious social issues, like the drug issue in Brazil right now, which is very strong, and it's a very big, critical social problem.
E os problemas sociais, principalmente das drogas, é uma droga chamada crack, que acaba transformando a vida de muitos jovens. Espero que o evento da Copa do Mundo e também das Olimpíadas possa também ser um momento de transformação para o nosso país e também para os nossos jovens.
For example, crack is is a drug that's causing some very negative changes and transformations in the lives of youth right now, and I believe that that the World Cup and the Olympics can be an opportunity to change all of that with the incentive of sport.
O esporte transformou a minha vida e, na verdade, o esporte me colocou diante de todos vocês. Espero que esses eventos que acontecem no Brasil possam também oportunizar uma vida melhor para todos os jovens do Brasil.
Sport has transformed my life and sport has put me in front of you, so I believe that sport can do the same for the lives of others and bring a lot of incentive to the children of Brazil.
Eu teria todas as outras possibilidades para ir por outro caminho do mal, mas o esporte me encaminhou para que eu pudesse transformar a vida, não só a minha vida, mas também ser exemplos e referência para muitos jovens do Brasil. E hoje eu desenvolvo um trabalho, uma instituição, onde que nós fazemos um trabalho de inclusão social através do esporte.
My life could have gone for the worse many times and had all the opportunities to choose a wrong path, but sport has always brought me to good. And right now I have an institution that's working with poor children, and I'm hoping to do the same for them.
E quero acreditar, e nós brasileiros acreditamos muito, que é possível, basta que cada faça a sua parte.
I want to believe, and we Brazilians really strongly believe in it, that we can do the change if each person does their own part.
Thanks very much, Vanderlei. Well, those were our councillors. Let's speak now and hear from our delegates. We're going to start off with China and Holly, who actually lives here and works in the United States right now. When we were listening to Miller and then to another delegate, I think from Samoa this morning, he described our world as very much a Eurocentric, traditional, even English language dominated world. And now we're in a situation where we have 5 emerging key actors on the global stage that represent 4 regions and God knows how many languages between them. Talk about the understandings culturally, but also the misunderstandings and how you glue those parts together.
Yeah, I've been living in the States for 5 years for now, and I think cultural understanding is critical for people to work together, especially like when in this global atmosphere. And this is a little bit abstract, so I can give you guys an example, like what is actually cultural understanding. I always hear like when American people will talk to you and say, oh, please interrupt me if you have any questions during the speech, right? And people will ask questions during the speech. But in China, probably it's not a polite way to interact people during the speech. So this is a kind of cultural understanding. It's not right or wrong to interact people during the speech or not. It's not. It's just a culture question. So I think people in China and other part of the world really needs to bring the knowledge and understanding together to collaborate and to work together. And also I want to say another point about the global corporate culture, because now I'm working for Lenovo, is actually the one of the 2 largest PC companies in the world. And this is a truly global company, but it is a Chinese origin. So when you work in this kind of company, it's important to know how to work with people in different parts of the world and to actually bring this company up. So I think smaller side is the company, bigger side is the world, how we can work with each other better. Thank you.
And we also, very nearby, have Konstantin from Russia. I don't know about you, but when we listen to a lot of what's being said about BRICS, and we read a lot, it comes across as very bold, cool, even sexy to a lot of people. But when we talk about the emerging economies, so many of them are now being affected by the global slowdown. And what everyone needs to remember that they're emerging economies and not yet emerged economies. Talk about the sustainability aspect that involves.
Yeah, thanks, James. Well, just to figure out, we all should remember that these 5 countries, about 40% of the whole world populations live in, and at the same time, so many people are responsible for the 40% of the whole carbon dioxide emissions in the whole world. And the population of the countries will grow up, and that means that all consuming in terms of marketing and production, all the goods will also increase. And these emissions will increase and resources can fall down. That means that we should take part in this sustainability just to search for new resourcing and to how make our current resources renewable. Well, for example, just taking account Brazil, I was amazed when I knew that almost 90% of all cars running in Brazil using a biofuel made from ethanol. India builds lots of greenhouses already. They have a plan by 2020 to build about 10% of all the buildings being green in their country. China invests about $500 billion in all renewable energy sources till 2020. So that's amazing, guys. And here, on the second hand from Russia, I can say that there is something with knowledge, a little bit educational from our side, because we are still considering that our country is too big, is too large, we have too many resources, we have lots of water, we have lots of air, lots of forests. Well, for example, we had a law last year for energy savings when our president said, okay, we cannot produce any electrical lamps over 100 of watts. What is doing? The manufacturer started to produce the lamp with 99 watts of power. That's the same with other things. So, for example, for effluent water and air treatment plants, this law was just legalized last year, and only the hugest companies with a huge turnover are obliged to have effluent water treatment plants, and others, well, they can just leave their stocks anywhere. So this is something for us all to consider about the ecology and the global and our future, because this is the world where we shall live, and this is the world on which we shall have probably the major impact.
Okay.
Thank you.
We can't talk about BRICS and not talk about education. And we can't talk about BRICS without talking about the model of South Africa, a country that's transformed itself in less than a generation. Mpho is an accountant in South Africa, but you also teach maths and sciences in your spare time at weekends. What do you have to add to this?
Good evening, everyone. The biggest thing that I'd like to add is the distortion of information. So the published literacy rate for South Africa is 86.6%. The current matric, which is the grade 11 or the grade 12 equivalent, is 70.3%. The pass mark for grade 12, however, is only 30%. So one has to question what the quality is of the output that you get that contributes to that very literacy rate. There are a few countries within the BRICS, off the top of my head I can think of China and Russia, that have better literacy outputs than South Africa does. And from a personal perspective, I'd like to see better collaboration in terms of sharing information about what other countries are doing differently and doing better in terms of how they transfer the knowledge and implement the curricula within their schools. To use a practical example, I teach mathematics and science at a school in a township in Cape Town, and the pass rate at the school currently for grade 8 is about 13%, 1-3. For grade 9, it's about 17%. We have tests every week that the children write, and the highest mark that the child, one of the girls in the class, has gotten is only 35%. These are shocking results, but these are the people that we think or we hope that will one day run our country, and these are the people that are supposed to be the future generation for our country, and it's quite concerning that we're not fully leveraging off the cross-pollination regarding education with fellow countries in the BRICS. Thank you.
Okay. Mpho was just talking about some of the people who she hopes will be leading your country, your continent, our world in the future. And I would like to think that of the 1,000+ people in this room, that at least a couple of you who will be leading your countries one day in the next generation. Talking about leadership, though, not just at the central senior level, but at every level, we have Alexandre from Brazil. Your website focuses on transparency. Talk about the challenges relating to that for leadership in BRICS countries and in terms of corruption also.
Okay, so for us Brazilians, we all know that corruption is something very, very widespread in like all levels of society, and it's sometimes something that you just can't avoid, just something that you can, like it literally comes from like the higher levels to the lower levels and contaminates everything to the extent that you even lose your freedom of speech, and sometimes it's very hard to do action towards it. So I really believe that we should be taking action. We should be taking action personally, and sorry guys, we should be doing actions towards that. Because this problem is too big for us to look and say, hey, look, we're going to solve this thing and we're going to take politics and solve it. So I really believe that we should be investing our time into giving examples in doing things like what he is doing and what she is doing in these countries. Because if we just think that we're moving and that this thing is changing, I think that's unrealistic. So I really believe that you got to do things like that, and that we gotta take less greedy actions and make less greedy enterprises focus in the social aspects and still do well. So yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot. To wrap things up and to tie things together, we want to give the last word to Paris from India, not least because India is the current chair of the BRICS grouping and as such was the host of this year's Leaders Summit over in New Delhi. We've been talking about access, we've been talking about education, leadership, governance, transparency, linkages with private sector and NGOs. Talk about all these elements pulled together, especially related to the leaders meeting, and think also about what each one of us in this room, as the next generation of leaders, why it's relevant to us.
Thanks, James. So 2 things to pull out before I go into the summit. Like my friend mentioned, so the BRICS represent about over 40% of the global population. 4 of the top 10 countries are a part of the BRICS. Now, there's no point in crying about the fact that why BRICS exists. We exist, let's get on with it. There are so many economical benefits of being together which should be leveraged. Now, keeping that in mind, the heads of states have been meeting at leaders' summits. The latest one was held in Delhi in end of March. And a few of the things that stood out and as individuals and for me particularly was, one was the discussion about a development bank. So the development bank, according to the leaders or the heads of states, is a platform to put funds together where they can invest in infrastructure, education, in systems in all these countries, in the BRIC economies, to make a better life. And secondly was about a policy to get economies together by lending in local currencies. Now the local currencies will invariably strengthen their currency, but also, and this may happen, I don't know if it will, but this may reduce the emphasis on the dollar in these economies, which will help the local governments, the local people. As a head point, which I hope one day will get added, would be corruption, which is a common concern. If there could ever be a code of conduct amongst BRICS economies, that would take it a step further. So I think where we come in is that the development phase of these economies being together is, the advantage is humongous. So let's use that, and as leaders of tomorrow, let's be a part of the change.
Okay. So that's our session on BRICS. As much as we talk about policy and governance and combined foreign reserves, we asked someone earlier what BRICS meant to him, and he said people. That's 3 billion people who are driving the change and the transformation that we see in the world. 3 billion people who are bringing about new opportunities for every one of us. And I think it's 3 billion people, no matter which part of the world that we happen to be from, who are our collective and shared responsibility. So thank you for your time, and let's hand over to Kate.
Thank you.
A big round of applause for the BRICS. This is the future. Fantastic. Thank you, James. Thank you, all of the councillors. This is something really exciting, and I think we look forward in future summits to doing the same thing again. BRICS taking up leadership, and our first summit in one of the BRICS in Johannesburg in October next year. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.